Oh my God, I've got a great future behind me. What a wonderful welcome from Jamali, and my respects to his people and to all Aboriginal people and all of you here, and your ancestors as well who have led you here on your own journeys. I couldn't talk about Families Australia without mentioning my own family. You know, I listened back to that CV, which, you know, may sound like a lot, but it's like eating an elephant. You know, how do you eat it? One bite at a time, and it sort of adds up over the years. But, you know, I think back to my childhood, and there is nothing in my childhood that would have suggested that I would have done any of those things or be here, standing here talking to you today. And I was born into a family that lived on the margins of Australia. We moved from town to town, just looking for work, just looking to survive. We were effectively homeless for the first 15 years of my life. We had no housing security at all. We slept in the backs of cars, tents, caravans, on the floors of relatives' houses. I changed schools 14 times before I was even into high school. And for much of that period, I didn't go to school at all. I remember the welfare officers coming around to schools when I was there and feeling that threat that we could be taken from our families at any time. And if you looked at my life, if someone walked in and did an audit of our family, poor, Aboriginal, no permanent home, sleeping in a bed with my two brothers, sometimes my grandfather, not going to school for great periods, then people would be able to make a case to have taken me from my family. And nothing could have been more disastrous. Because despite all of that, I came from a family of great love and support, tenacity and courage, and there is no way in the world that I would even be here if it wasn't for them. What we become is what our families create, and I am a result of the great love of my own family. So I want to pay respect to my mum and dad and for giving me the gifts that they did. I really want to sort of broaden the view a little bit today and to sort of look at the world that our children are going to be living in and the world they're going to have to negotiate. There's a story about two young fish who are swimming in the ocean, and a larger, older, wiser fish swims by and says, "How's the water today, boys?" The two young fish swim on. One turns to the other and says, "What the hell is water?" That's the world we're living in. What the hell is going on in our world? And our children having to negotiate this world that is so liquid. There's a great sociologist and philosopher, Zygmunt Bauman, who talked about what he called liquid modernity, that the ground beneath our feet is shifting. There is no place for us to stand. How do we make sense of this world we are living in? I was talking to Tanya just earlier this morning, and she said she was driving her young boy to school, and he asked her, "Mum, is there going to be a world war?" Pope Francis, before he'd passed away, had actually said, "We are living in World War III." In fact, World War II may never have ended. The short peace was followed by the Korean War, the Vietnam War, conflicts all around our world at various stages. I reported as a correspondent the wars of Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, the Balkans. Our world is constantly in turmoil, but I don't think we have faced an inflection point as dangerous as the one we are living in now. And I want to give some sort of perspective to this, to try to connect the dots so that when we come to think about shaping futures, we have to think about the world that our kids are going to be living in. There are moments in time when the world turns. Sometimes we're not even aware of it, but the planets align. I think for me it was 1979. I was just about to go into my last year of high school, which is how old I am. And the English rock band, The Clash, released their landmark album, London Calling. And in London Calling was a cry of the children of the Cold War who lived with the threat of nuclear disaster. The ice age is coming, that we needed to prepare for meltdown. What happened in 1979? Margaret Thatcher got elected as the first woman to be Prime Minister of Great Britain, led her Conservative Party to victory. A couple of years later, Ronald Reagan would come to power in the United States, and Reagan and Thatcher would help to shape the trajectory of politics and economics right up until the age that we're living in now. In the same year, there was the Iranian Revolution, when the Ayatollah came to power. And of course, we're seeing today where we are with Iran right now. In 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, which led to the rise of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and ultimately preempted the collapse of the Soviet Empire. In the same year, 1979, Deng Xiaoping began a series of economic reforms in China that would lead China from what was once derided as the sick man of Asia to become today the biggest engine of economic growth in the world and a rival to the power of the United States. When you connect all of those dots, when you lay those events over our age, you can see how in so many ways we are living in the shadow of 1979. The 21st century has never really started. We are still living in the catastrophes of the 20th century. 2 world wars, a rise of fascism, economic collapse, global pandemic. And we are still trying to answer 21st century questions with 20th century solutions. And they are not working. What we saw in 1979 was not just a series of events. What we saw were ideas in action. Ideas in action. The rise of neoliberalism, Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, who believed that the market was greater than society. Margaret Thatcher famously said, "There is no such thing as society. There is just the market." For a while that was triumphant. But of course we saw the global financial crash. We've seen the rising global inequality. The United States, where the top 1% of people in the United States have wealth 950 times greater than the bottom 50% combined. 1%, 950 times the wealth of the bottom 50% combined. The seeds of this market-first ideology that led to concentrations of wealth and meant that if you were born poor, you died poorer. In the United States, in recent years, life expectancy has gone backwards. And out of this seething anger and resentment, people who feel left behind, discarded, abandoned, they turn on each other. They look for the scapegoat. It must be their fault, the migrants' fault. It must be someone else's fault. Let's elect Donald Trump because Donald Trump speaks for us, the left behind. And Donald Trump, of course, is a billionaire who has benefited exactly from the policies that led to this gross wealth inequality in the first place. The Iranian Revolution, which supercharges a rise of terror and violence that I've reported on all around the world. The Taliban and Al-Qaeda taking root in Afghanistan, that led to the attack in 9/11, and then 20 years of unending war in Afghanistan until the United States withdrew. And now the Taliban are back in power and women cannot go to school or show their faces in public. And we're okay with it. The world lives with this. It is factored in. The Soviet Union collapses in 1991 after the Berlin Wall comes down in 1989. That in the West we decided was the end of history. Liberal democracy had triumphed. What we see when we fast forward, we see Vladimir Putin in charge of Russia, invading Ukraine, changing the borders of Europe as we speak. And of course in China, where I lived for 11 years, the Chinese Communist Party centralising their power, and now we are actively preparing, increasing our military spending and actively talking about preparation for a potential war with China that would be utterly catastrophic. We see the rise of two things in 1979. We see the rise of a Western triumphalist view, a Western hubris that we see unravelling before our eyes. We see a triumph of democracy that now leads to a recession of democracy around the world. And we see a rise of a constellation of powers who reject the idea of the freedoms and the democracies that we are supposed to cherish in the West, even though those very freedoms are disenfranchising so many people. I covered as a journalist that period from the events of 1979 until now. It was an extraordinary experience to be able to see up close history turn. I was there in South Africa when Nelson Mandela was elected the first black president of South Africa. I sat in the Oval Office with Barack Obama, the first black president of the United States. I was in the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan. I was there in the Great Hall of the People when Xi Jinping was announced as the new supreme leader of China. I travelled into the secretive world of North Korea. I've stood in marketplaces that were bombed out. I've seen children who were kidnapped and turned into suicide bombers. This world that I've seen up close, and a world that our children are going to have to negotiate and navigate. Imagine what life would have looked like for a child, say 15 years old in 1913, on the cusp of the First World War. The war we were told was the war to end all wars. And when war ends a global pandemic, the Spanish flu, which killed more people than were killed in World War I and dwarfs the COVID pandemic that we went through. Then, of course, in 1929, the Great Depression, which supercharged a rise of fascism across Europe that led to the Nazis coming to power in Germany and then into war again in 1939. Our 15-year-old would have fought potentially in two wars if they survived the pandemic, if they survived the Great Depression, and then emerge after World War II having seen nuclear weapons used on human beings, the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. To have emerged blinking into this new world that we called the American century. A Cold War standoff between the Soviets and the West, who had fought together against the Nazis. Imagine this child that sees borders disappear and countries vanish before their eyes. To have lived in a period where no one travelled by air, and then in the 1960s to see humans land on the moon. Well, I think a 15-year-old today is on the cusp of similar transformation. It is hard for us to imagine what a 15-year-old is going to see by the time they stand here and speak to you at the age that I am. But I will guarantee you this: the world will not look the way that it does. I guarantee you that countries that exist today will no longer even exist. If you think that might be alarmist, go and look at a map of Europe 50 years ago, 30 years ago. Where's Yugoslavia gone? The countries that emerged after the fall of the Soviet Empire in Eastern Europe. Countries that disappear, the borders of our world constantly changing. Think about the technological advances that they're going to see. There is more power, computer power, in this phone than NASA required to put man on the moon. Think about what travel is going to look like. It would mean unthinkable when I was a boy to imagine that I would have travelled to the places that I did and lived in the parts of the world that I did. And now I think nothing of jumping on a plane and tomorrow waking up in New York or London or Beijing. They are going into such a period of rapid change, uncertainty and potential catastrophe. We may very well be in World War III. We may not even know it. Like the frog boiling slowly in hot water doesn't even realise the water is getting warm. World War III will not look like World War I or World War II. World War III may have already begun in cyberspace. There is already the capacity to shut down everything that we are connected to, just like that. And if there is a global war, we can bet that it will be inevitably a nuclear war. And given the power of the weapons and the proliferation of nuclear weapons that we see in our world today, we can't shudder to consider what the human cost of that will be. What the future looks like is unimaginable for us, because I was fortunate to live through what we facetiously called the long peace, because of course there were endless conflicts. But I did not have to live through the seismic global eruptions that I fear that our kids are going to have to live through. It's a gloomy outlook, no doubt about it. Because if we look at the events of our world today, that's exactly what it tells us. What's it like for a child growing up today in the war zones of our world, where the bombs are falling, where going to school is a luxury? What's it like when so many of our people in the world go to bed hungry in a world where there is so much plenty, where we have never had more billionaires in our world, and yet we know that people who are born into poverty more than likely will die in poverty? This is the world that we have created. This is the world that our young people are going to have to navigate and enter. One of the real challenges that I see when I look around the world and I consider the rapid change, this liquid modernity, where kids are no longer sure of the ground that they even stand on, is the sense that for so many young people, they don't know what to believe in. We have delivered them to a world where technology has shrunk our world, where we can be connected instantly to friends that we may never even see in cyberspace. That we have this unlimited freedom. And yet I get a sense from so many young people that what they really want to know is, where am I safe? Where do I belong? What can I believe in? If we can't connect the dots, if we can't look at these big events that we may think are so distant from us, yeah, the bombs aren't falling here, we're not at war here. Australia is a remarkably rich country. If we think it can't happen, history tells us it can and it does. For my people, for Aboriginal people, we know what it is like for the world to end like that. Strangers arrive, new weapons arrive, disease arrives, and entire populations are wiped out. when I covered these wars, when I looked into the eyes of refugees in Iraq and Syria and Pakistan and Afghanistan, I saw the eyes of my people looking back at me, my parents, my grandparents, because that's the world that they emerged from, of upheaval, of conflict, of uncertainty. Growing up as an Aboriginal boy, moving from town to town, looking for a way in, looking for a place to belong, wondering sometimes where our next meal is going to come from. That comes when all certainty ends and we have to find a way to survive. So we can't be complacent and think that these things, these plates that are shifting, these planets that aligned in 1979 that are playing out in real time in our world today, if we think that cannot affect us here. Because it can and it does. And we need to prepare our children and to be cognizant of these risks and to build a world of safety and love like my parents built for me, to allow us to survive the upheaval, the rupture, the uncertainty that we find ourselves when we are tossed onto the waves of history. So many of our young people not knowing what it is to believe, to belong, and to feel safe. That the idea of truth no longer exists. That we are free to choose our own version of the truth. The collapse of media, which is no longer accountable or responsible, but far too often partisan, picking a side, one side against another, picking the winners and the losers, the good guys and the bad guys, when in fact, having travelled the world and reported the world, I find it increasingly difficult to be able to separate them at their worst. But still to believe that some things are worth fighting for. That my grandfather, who fought in a war for this country when he was not recognised as a citizen of this country, because he believed that it was worth fighting for. And in this world where we don't know what truth is, and when evil itself can be justified, to give our kids a sense of what is right and what is true and what is decent. To hold on to those values that we know in ourselves from our parents are the things that nourish us. How do our kids separate what is good and true from what is evil when we no longer even have the language to describe these things? When, according to some surveys, so many people don't believe in democracy because democracy itself has so miserably failed so many people. The danger is that we throw it all out. The danger is that we just pick our sides, go to war with one another. But there is one thing I have known from reporting these things, from living this life, from an Aboriginal boy growing up in the shadow of Australia's history to reporting the big events of our time, is that at the heart is a fundamental human decency, a love and a courage to get up and face the next day and to provide a place of safety for our children. I saw it in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Gaza, in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, in Washington. I've seen it wherever I've reported that there is a fundamental goodness in people and holding on to that. And that these things of freedom and liberty and democracy, which are so easily mocked, are actually values that we should cherish and hold our politicians to be account to. Because those things are worth fighting for. Those things are worth preserving. One of the real challenges for our kids is to be entering into this world of rapidly changing technology, where the idea of what it is to be a human no longer exists. The potential of transhumanism, that AI makes so many of us redundant. Entire jobs are going to disappear. What happens to people in the way that the Industrial Revolution changed the nature of our relationship to nature itself, our relationship to each other. Communities disappeared, factories appeared, towns exploded, cities exploded. We're going to see the same thing. What do we do when human beings are redundant? What do we do when robots, AI, can perform the functions that human beings perform today? Do we end up in a soulless world where we no longer know what it is to be human at all? I read something not long ago, and it was from a theologian named Hans Urs von Balthasar. And he contemplated this idea of the rapid technological change of our age and what it means for the human soul. And he said, whenever the relationship between nature and grace is severed, then the whole of worldly being falls under the dominion of knowledge, and the springs and forces of love immanent in the world are overpowered and finally suffocated by science, technology, and cybernetics. The result is a world without women, without children, without reverence for love, in poverty and humiliation, a world in which power and the profit margin are the sole criteria, where the disinterested, the useless, the purposeless is despised, persecuted, and in the end exterminated. A world in which art itself is forced to wear a mask and the features of technology. It wasn't that long ago I saw a painting done by artificial intelligence that sold for more than $1 million. If we cannot hold on to the essence of what a human being is, if we cannot give our kids something of the love that my family gave me in a world of uncertainty, if we cannot impart to them the eternal truths of the soul, that the beautiful things, the true things, the love between people matters, then we are going to be slaves of technology. We're going to be tossed on the winds of history. We can't stop the great changes in our world. We can't stop the great wars of our world. We can't even necessarily say that we can keep our children safe. Too many people in the world wake up every day with that harsh reality. But I also know that deep in the human being is this indomitable spirit, this capacity for survival and love and courage. And that's what we have to hold on to. That's what we have to impart to our kids, that in this world of uncertainty, that they still have a place, and that being a human being matters. Every morning in Sydney, I get up where I live and I walk along the beach, along the cliff tops before dawn. Every morning I see young people out. You know, the census tells us that belief in God, that belief in religion and faith is receding, but not the human soul. Every morning I see young people up before dawn to watch the sunrise, because that matters. As my people know, in 60,000 years of sunrises, that the sunrise brings a new dawn of hope. And even though they may be taking a photo on their mobile phone to share with their Facebook friends, there is an act of optimism and hope that is not just believing that the world will get better, because they know that it so often doesn't, but to say that being a human being means that I can find the love and the courage to survive it, that there is a place for me to stand in this liquid world of so much change. And that's what we have to be able to nurture in our kids, that sense of that sunrise, that there is the chance in a world of so much uncertainty to hold on to the human soul. We're going to go to questions in just a moment, but I want to finish with a quote from a television program that I don't watch a lot of TV. Even though I worked in it, I never really watched it. But there was one program a friend of mine told me to watch with the very strange title of Fleabag. Did any of you ever watch Fleabag? it really spoke to the things that I've spoken to you about today. This character who feels bereft, who has so many options, so many choices, so much freedom, but nowhere to belong and no one to love her. And there was this one moment that just stayed in my mind. It's the Fleabag confession scene where she goes to a priest and she says, "Father, I want someone to tell me what to wear in the morning. No, I want someone to tell me what to wear every morning. I want someone to tell me what to eat, what to like, what to hate, what to rage about, what to listen to, what band to like, what to buy tickets for, what to joke about, what not to joke about. I want someone to tell me what to believe in, who to vote for and who to love, and how to tell them I love them. I just think I want someone to tell me how to live my life, Father, because so far I think I've been getting it wrong. And I know that's why people want someone like you in their lives, because you just tell them how to do it. You just tell them what to do and what they'll get out of the end of it, even though I don't believe your bullshit. And I know that scientifically nothing I do makes any difference in the end anyway. I'm still scared. Why am I still scared? Just tell me what to do. Just fucking tell me what to do, Father. I think there are so many of our kids who we think are so grown up and have so many options, as we heard from Tanya, turning on each other because of this uncertainty. And look around at the world that we have created and the world that we have left them and wonder, please, someone, tell me what to do. I don't know what to believe in and I don't know how to love anymore. That's your task. Every one of you in this room. It's all of our task to make sure that our kids know they're loved like I did, and they know how to love and they know who to love. And they know what is right and what is true in a world that wants to tell them there's no such thing as truth. Thank you.